back to MFA Writers. I'm so happy to have you here. This week, the podcast is excited to take you abroad to explore a Canadian MFA program at the University of British Columbia. This episode was requested by Michelle DaCosta. As a reminder to everyone listening, we're always happy to take requests. So if there's a program you want to hear about that we haven't covered yet, just let us know. And seeing as we're just at the start of Season 5, I also want to remind you all that we accept applications to be a guest on the show. So if you or someone you know is interested, go to mfawriters.com and click the Apply button. We look forward to hearing from you. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms, or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, once again, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/MFAWriters. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Vivian Xiao Wen Li. Vivian is a queer and neurodivergent Chinese-Canadian writer, director, musician, and interdisciplinary artist who recently graduated with an MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia. She's the winner in the short story category of the Creative Writing Collective Sustaining Shared Futures Writing Award, and her fiction and poetry have been published in the Massachusetts Review, the New Quarterly, Querty, and elsewhere. Her chapbook, Someday I Promise I'll Love You, from 845 Press, was nominated for the B.P. Nicol Chapbook Award. Today, Vivian has brought an excerpt from her debut experimental novel titled To You in the Waves of the Future, which will be going on submission soon.
Thank you so much. So to introduce this excerpt or the novel a little bit, To You in the Waves in the Future is a slipstream novel about two sisters trying to save each other through time with letters from the past, present, and future. The work engages Chinese philosophical themes and literature as a magical system, as well as experimental formatting to explore the wave-like and fragmentary nature of memory, depression, and childhood trauma. I'll be reading just the excerpt. This is the beginning of the novel. Gold. These days, whenever I hear you singing, I'm often reminded of our mother's gaze the last time I saw her alive, how she delicately drew arcs across the edge of my palms and kissed them, or our grandmother's soft kneading of dumplings as a flour fell into pans, or decades later, how the moon glimmered when her father tried to see his mother through it. Sometimes I can imagine you sinking through the floorboards of the house, your braids pent up in pollen whirls as you cradle my forehead, crooning, "Look at me, won't you? I'm still here. I'm still breathing." And I press my daffodil skin inside out and dry my petals in the pain. In the rose container mother left on our bedside table, I've kept another token of our promise. You always loved how the stone beads in aquariums twirled in the underwater spouts, and over the last few years, I've gathered a few blue shells, their varnish smooth, their ribs flattened. When I recall your laughing face in summer days as I sit seeking out the ocean, I imagine your dress dissolving to the sunrise, a velvet sheet suspending all portents. You toss your head to the side, shoulder zipping into a sigh, and I shiver as another memory blooms, more vibrant than the first, your pink bleeding notebook by the riverside. But if I listen long and hard enough, I'll catch your last vibrating notes. Isn't it colder sitting alone? Come here, Layla. How unceasing and whirling your words remain, like those rare seconds before the blue shells bubble to the sand, their rise forgotten, and how achingly remember the people we've lost, and the guilt, and the pain that endures. I realize now this is the way the world reminds us to keep our promises. Red. Whenever Mother brought home a cluster of mulberries, almost but not quite expired from our grocery job, we would share them with Uncle Wu and his wife. They were always gracious with their offerings, despite the relative wealth from Auntie Wu's inheritance. We grew up having family barbecues together, and as they aged, our next-door neighbors sauced the daughters who never had. At the end of the adults drinking and the stomach full of oil, we'd be sent off with pink roses braided into our hair, and a dozen other presents Auntie Wu said are because you're Guai and you're Mei. She said this with a discriminate pat on our heads, and while sometimes the order of her pats would change, the order of her words wouldn't. Who it was she thought was beautiful versus obedient was a heated topic of debate between us. Was it you with the long eyes, tall nose, and sensitive feet who could feel how far away a stone fell on the ground without seeing it? Or me with the double eyelids, round mouth, and thin wrists who could scoop up pebbles caught in driftwood? We could never decide on an answer, and when we asked our parents, Mother responded that we were equally spoiled and misbehaved. Good girls don't ask that question, she tisked.
Vivian, thanks so much for reading that. That was beautiful, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you, too. You have such an interesting story and so many artistic interests. That's the first thing that stood out to me about you as a writer and an artist was that you were not just one thing. You write poetry. We mentioned your chapbook. You've won prizes in fiction, been shortlisted for others in nonfiction and screenwriting. You've made short films that have premiered in various international film festivals. And those are just a few of your artistic pursuits. So I guess my first question is, have you always had this kind of varied artistic interest in lots of different genres and lots of different forms?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think I've always been very interested in different things in the world, but I think, for me, recently, creation has been something that I'm really passionate about. And I think the way my brain works is very much like I see a lot of different connections between different art forms. And like, for instance, like something in opera, the musical quality of opera can help me with like this feeling of the musicality and the poetry, which also influences my fiction writing. And so I feel like everything I'm learning, I'm trying to like apply in different ways. And I just find a lot of like, I guess, joy in like just exploring different artistic avenues and like just seeing how the similar themes can like be redeveloped in different ways as well in my writing and my art practice. And I just really enjoy like exploring different things. And I think there was one time when I was like, okay, it was like a couple years ago. I was like, hey, Vivian, you have to like focus on one thing, one genre, and it's going to be the novel, and you're going to only do the novel. And then for that 1 week, I did nothing related to the novel. And so I just gave up. I was like, yeah, I think I am just going to have to figure out a way to navigate my brain in a way that makes sense to me. And a lot of my friends say I'm very chaotic good or chaotic organized. And I think that's kind of how I feel about my my organization skills and my I guess the way I approach art sometimes, which is very like it seems chaotic to the outside mind, I guess, but to me there's a lot of like threads that I really I see the interconnections between.
Well, I want to hear more about those threads because, you know, kind of like you alluded to, I've talked to a lot of writers who feel like they have to just focus in on one genre in order to master it, so to speak. But clearly you get something from working in all of these different genres. So what has that been like for you? Like, in what ways do you see working in one genre affecting the way you work in other genres? And how does one improve by working in another?
I think for me, like, for instance, when I'm the poetry writing, I'm kind of exploring and doing whatever observations or like insights I gain from that can apply to the fiction. And I feel like the quality of like the way I write fiction is very related to like the musical quality of the words. And I think in playwriting, when I write plays and listening to the characters speaking in the dialogue, and that helps me when I'm trying to think about dialogue in fiction. And then when we did the screenwriting course and also the graphic forms related course, I also focused a little bit more on like the visuals. And like, since I'm a very, like, I guess, auditory writer, I think after doing that course, I was like, oh, more focused a little bit more on the visuals, and that, like, I feel like that enriched the fiction writing. I feel like my first love is probably fiction for sure. But I think there's so much that we can learn from other genres that I've never really, and this is the program for it, I guess, but like, the MFA program I just did, but like, I really didn't want to be like secluded in one section off in one genre because I felt so much potential in exploring other genres and bringing back what I've learned kind of thing. Yeah, just, and also like with the playwriting and like listening to really listening to the actors and really listening to like how the characters respond to each other, that really helped with my fiction. And we did like a staged reading of my full-length play, The Unknown My Childhood Arts Club, for the program, for the LEAP program. And so listening to all the actors, like just like saying out loud the words, and like just that helped a lot with thinking about dialogue in fiction as well. So like, I think it's just little, like, I'm just kind of like seeing threads going through, and just, I don't want to like cut them off. And I think, that's something that I've always been really excited to do, like just keep finding connections, and keep exploring those connections and keep like deepening those connections.
So what about from like a process standpoint? Does your process change when you're writing a poem versus writing a short story versus writing a play? Does like the way you approach the work change, or is it pretty similar?
Oh no, it changes. Yeah. For sure. It changes a lot. I think for me, whenever I have like, an idea or something, like it could be like a short story or an idea for a poem, or I think it comes from different places for me. For like a short story, it could come from like, I don't know, it could come from multiple places, but it could be like an idea, it could be a mood. With poetry, sometimes a lot of it comes from like an observation for me, and then, or like a musical quality or a feeling in the world. And that I develop through like kind of just the feeling or auditory sensations as I'm writing. But for plays and for like screenwriting, I think I approach it in more of like, I don't know, like, I think for me, although I do a lot of different genres, I think I have to be able to, there's one big project I focus on every time, and a couple of like smaller things on the side kind of thing that I go back to. So when I was writing my play, it was very much like, okay, I'm going to listen very, very hard to the characters. When I was writing my TV pilot, it was more like, I'm going to like listen, but also like see kind of what's happening. The screenwriting is very much like visually what kind of thing you want to see, and like, because I really want to direct it in the future I'm writing, so I'm like really trying to visualize it. And then for the novel was like it's a combination of like, I guess like craft as well as like feeling and like musical quality, but also like the ideas behind it. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I think I do approach it in different ways. Mm-hmm. Depending on the idea, I think maybe it might be suited better for a certain genre, like maybe like a shorter, like funny thing could be like a comic. And I put that in my notes kind of thing to go back to later. But I think when I approach a story or approach like a TV pilot or whatever it is, I just think, okay, what is this genre? What can I kind of explore in its full capacity? And what do I want to bring to it that I have like experience from other genres? So that's kind of how I approach it.
Okay, so you have this screenwriting background as well, and you just finished this novel. I'm curious, like when you were writing the novel, were you already thinking like how this might be adapted into a screenplay?
I think it would be interesting, but I don't know, like it would be interesting to see it adapted, but I don't see it as a feature right now or a film right now. I think the TV pilot I wrote, definitely I see it as I could adopt it into a YA novel, because I've been submitting it places and people have been giving me feedback saying it's like, it's good, but it's a lot of like a high budget production. And they said like, you'd have to have a lot more credentials to pitch that because it was super high budget. It's like a silk punk TV drama. So yeah, I don't think
we could all use a few more credentials, right?
Yeah. I would probably have to make it into a YA novel first. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting that like, it seems like you approach them in a way that kind of, there's a separation between them. It's like, okay, I'm I'm writing a poem and this is what I have to think about when I write a poem. Or I'm writing a novel and I'm only thinking about this as a novel. I'm not thinking about it becoming a movie. This is a novel, So it's just interesting to work in so many different genres, but really kind of have a separation between them in a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's for the story. I think the story needs this kind of I think if the story fits this kind of genre, then I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to explore. But I feel like with every project I'm doing, I really think of it as like standing on itself. And like, I think there are things I bring to each genre. Like I was saying, like listening to dialogue, like the poetry. But like, I think, for me, it's the story itself fits the genre and then I'm going to explore it to its fullest. And if I want to adapt it later with the TV pilot, then I can, but like, that's like, I'm going to focus on that one thing for now kind of thing.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. Okay, so you didn't originally pursue creative writing as a student. In fact, you graduated from the University of Toronto with a degree in English and philosophy. In what ways do you see that background influencing your writing today?
Well, I think it definitely helped a lot because, actually, like, to be honest, like, even though when I was younger, like, people, like some English teachers were saying like, oh, you should become a writer. But then I never really saw myself pursuing that because the things we were reading, we were not reading anything like BIPOC kind of writers. So I didn't see myself in a lot of the ways that writing could be approached. I was like, but I don't write like this. Like I don't like, but then in, second year, I think we did Canadian short story class and we read one of Madeleine Tien's short stories. It was Simple Recipes. And I think that was like, that blew my mind because I was like, wow, this is the first time. And I think I could have like found it on my own. But like, I think back then I was more like just following what the curriculum was telling me to read and do. So I was like, wow, I can write about stuff that related to me and I can read stuff related to me. And it's like, I just thought like, wow, that's a possibility. And I think with the English and philosophy specifically, the courses, really helped me with like, I guess analyzing. And like, I feel like for me, how to learn how to create is a process of first like really analyzing and like understanding how other people do it. And then after that, like really finding like a rhythm to approach it yourself and then like take it on yourself kind of after that. So I think that English and philosophy degree really helped me like read a breadth of different stories and novels and like kind of different traditions and like help me kind of develop a kind of idea of how to analyze different stories and by the process of analyzing those stories, then later on realizing like, oh, like, did those work in that way? Like, did it do what the author wanted it to do? And like, how would I have changed it? Maybe this is not a really great way to approach it, but I was like, how would I have done it if I was the author in a different way, like kind of thing. And like, kind of like, just, I think that analyzation and like that critical thinking really helped me with like later approaching my own work and like kind of like, okay, I finished this story, but like, is it done, or is it like first draft, or is it, so like seeing like, how can I make it so that people can approach it in a way that I want them to approach it? I think that was really important to have for me. So yeah.
As an undergrad student, did you take any creative writing workshops?
Yeah, I did take a couple. There was a few from, I think, Victoria College that we could take. And yeah, I took a couple of them. And that also helped, I think, with like, I guess, getting a portfolio together for the MFA later on. And yeah, that helped with, I guess, analyzing other people's stories. And like, it helped me with that as well. But I think the English and philosophy degree really did help with like, just kind of analyzing. And then like the workshops helped me with like, getting a sense of like how people approach different topics in the world, like how we can give feedback, how that workshop process even works, like, and just having a group of people kind of like reading the story and like giving some of their thoughts on the story was really helpful for me as well.
Well, when you were trying to decide whether or not to pursue the MFA, you told me, both the MFA and studying for law school, which to me seem like very different paths. So how did you make that decision to ultimately pursue creative writing?
Yeah, it's definitely a different path. I don't think I'd be the same person today. I think it was, I think it was like I went to this networking event, and it was kind of like, what happens after graduation? It was at U of T. I think it was backpack to briefcase, something like that. Anyways, and then one of the people there, they said something that that really resonated with me, and she said like, you can always go back to school for something else later.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, life is short. I want to follow my heart. And by that time, my parents had already kind of given up on me making a lot of money because I did switch from English and physics to English and philosophy. So the moment I made that switch, my mom was like, "You're done. Like, that's it." Like, I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of right." Like, I don't see. But anyways, they kind of just gave up on writing at that point. So I was like, well, I'm doing creative writing. They're like, okay. So, and then I think I tried to like make that decision a little less, hard on them by going like, I'm going to fund it myself. So I like got scholarships and and then I got part-time jobs. And so I managed to fund the MFA by myself and like not have any kind of debt overs, which is great. But yeah, I think that helped with they're like, okay, why not? But although I did want to become like a human rights lawyer, I think I would have wanted to become that. But I think my heart was very much like, I really want to see where this goes. Like I really want to keep exploring writing and the arts, and yeah, so yeah.
So you ended up in the Masters of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. According to their website, this 2-year program is the first writing program in Canada and the largest and most comprehensive in the country. It seems the program has a big multi-genre focus, as you've mentioned a couple times. Students are required to actually work in multiple genres, and the program offers, according to the website, 12 different genres of writing that you can study. And I can't even think of 12 different genres. So this seems pretty unique and pretty well suited to your creative practice. How important was this multi-genre focus to you in deciding to attend this program?
I think it was super important because actually I think before this, I don't think I did as many. I mean, I was involved in different art forms, but I wasn't seriously pursuing them as much. I think this program really, the draw for me was very much oh, I don't have to be. I think there were some FA programs where I'm sure they're very great and amazing in their own ways, but would really focus on one genre, and they were you can't take any other workshops from any other genre. And I was like, but why? I was like, but why? And I don't know. I think I definitely am a jack of all trades, master of one. But I think the fact that they let us do different genres and they were like, go forth. I was like, oh wow, I want to try screenwriting. I want to try TV writing. I want to try comics. So it was just the draw of it was really important for me. And I think I'm neurodivergent, and I only realized that a couple of years ago. But I think even in high school, I was joining so many different clubs, and they were not related at all. But I was I need to try different things. And so I think that really helped with my decision as well.
Yeah. Okay, so there are these 12 different genres that you can study in, but do students in the program still have to choose one genre that's their main focus, that their thesis is about? How does that work?
Yeah, I think there is a focus. I think there's, okay, I should know this, but I think there was, I think when I was there doing the courses, I think it was you needed to do 3 of the, at least 2 or 3 of the credits of the same genre, I think it was. You would choose kind of a focus, and your thesis would be on a certain genre as well. But it was really nice to be able to take one course on screenwriting, one course in TV writing, and then one course in comics. And it wouldn't be it wouldn't take up too much of the credits as well. So yeah, it was you did have a focus, but they encouraged you to do different genres, and even to apply. I think when I first applied, you were asked to give them at least 2 or 3 different genres that you worked in, even if you only have one that you really specialize in. Mm-hmm. So I sent them fiction and poetry, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the classes and genres that you enjoyed the most when you were in the program?
I think for me, I keep talking about the screenwriting and the TV writing, which I did. And then there was, there were offerings for playwriting, but that was 2 credits. And so we had a limited amount of credits you could take, and I didn't want to take it with all the 2 credits. So, but I did take speculative fiction as well. And there was fiction and poetry, of course. And I took comics, which was like really fun. But I think with that course, I really realized like, wow, like art is so hard. Like visual art is so hard because I was like trying to draw things and then it was like, oh, it's not right. And I spent hours on it and one person would be like just scanning over it for 10 seconds. They'd be like, oh, that's all right. And it was like, I was like, wow, give me a new appreciation for like every comic artist in the world and visual artist. But that course, I think it helped me a lot with like starting to visualize a lot more about different things in fiction and poetry as well. So I feel like every course taught me something new and interesting.
I imagine attending a program with so many genres to explore creates a great opportunity to meet artists who are doing really unique work from one another. So what's the community like in the program? Yeah,
it's I think for me it started, so I was started in 2020. And because of that, I think the community was more of an online kind of community, and it could have been hard. I think it was a bit hard to meet people that way, but I tried to keep in touch with students by like sending them emails or trying to ask them to catch up after class. But the community, at least in second and like later on when I was still a Prism editor, I think it's really like most people are very welcoming and very kind and nice. And I was really afraid going in that it would be very competitive because I find that sometimes art can be very competitive in a very kind of toxic way, and I didn't want that. And I kind of felt that competitiveness through high school and university undergrad. So I was really a little bit afraid of that. But I think the fact that so many people came from different genres was actually really helpful because it meant everybody came from different perspectives and people. I was in a screenwriting class with people who already directed 2 films already, and I didn't even know how to write, like use the screenplay format. So I think, and then they like helped me through it. And so, and then the same thing happened for me, for them in poetry, kind of like, so we were kind of coming in with different like knowledge of different disciplines. And so it was I feel like that environment made it a lot less competitive, and also it's West Coast, so people are more chill there, I think. But yeah, it's just the weather and the nature, But yeah, I think I really enjoyed that aspect of the community as well.
I was curious about how many students are in the program. It wasn't totally clear from the website, but it seems like it's a pretty big program. So do you know how many students about are in the program at any one time?
I think so. There depends because there's people in like there's like a dual MFA program. I think there's a couple of dual ones in film production as well as in creative writing, and also in a few disciplines. And there's also the optional residency component, which is like really cool. I feel like because it's very open to people who already have full-time jobs but still want to do an MFA. You can apply for the optional residency and do like a part-time kind of asynchronous program. And then there's a section of it where you can do it in person in the summers. But I haven't really met many people from that program. I think with the in-person program, I think probably around, I don't know, I don't know how many exactly, but maybe like 15-ish, I would say. Because it's hard to tell because with everybody in different disciplines, we don't always meet the same people, probably around that much, I think. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. Yeah.
Well, that's something that if listeners are thinking about applying and want to know an exact number, they can reach out to the program and ask them. According to the website, the program has 12 professors, an additional 9 permanent instructors, and regularly brings in a wide variety of writers in residence and adjunct instructors from the writing community. So it sounds like there's no shortage of professors to study with and learn from. How important was that diversity of voices to your growth while in the program?
Yeah, I think it was really, I'm very grateful for the advice and the insights and just like having different genres we can study and different perspectives we could study from. I think actually this is something I was looking for when I was searching up MFA programs to apply for, was whether or not there were any BIPOC related faculty in the program. And there were some MFA programs where I didn't apply to at all because there was no BIPOC people in the faculty, not even people related or even lecturers. And I was just like but why? There has to be writers that are, writing in that, from that perspective. But like, I think I wanted really to find an MFA program that at least had that, because I know I have a friend who had a very, very negative experience in one of the MA programs in writing. And it was because it related to the fact that none of the faculty were BIPOC, and none of their peers were BIPOC either. And so they were writing things related to their identity, and then it was just like them fighting against all these microaggressions, and they actually gave up on writing creatively because of that. And so I was very aware of that potential, and very aware of the fact that there could be workshops that are very like damaging to people. and so I was really looking for like a more like inclusive and like diverse kind of environment. So that was a good exploration for me as well. Yeah.
And do you feel like you found that with this program? Were you able to build some good relationships with the professors there?
I think so in general. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think it was a little harder with like COVID and with like the ramifications of certain things happening. But I think in general, I think it was a good experience with the professors as well. And they're very kind and warm people. Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, the UBC MFA is a 2-year program. As you mentioned, you actually finished your coursework a couple years ago, and that's because you decided to take a little longer to finish than the 2 years. You actually finished in 4 years. So what made you decide to extend your time in the program? And is that an option for anyone who attends the program?
Yeah. So for me, I wanted to do some research from my novel and to go to China for that research. And I got a grant to go to China, but then I had to wait a bit longer than I thought because there was that zero COVID policy. And then right after it like opened up, and all of a sudden everybody was like sick. And so it took a little bit longer for me to actually go to China. So I think that was kind of the main reason. And I think it's possible for anybody to extend. I think the maximum you can extend for is like 5 years. The 2 years is like for me, it was like the coursework. A lot of people, I think, finish in like 3 years even. And also I think for me, the 4 year, I knew I would at least do 3 years because there was Prism International. And I knew it was going to be very intense. So I just decided, I was like, yeah, it has to be at least 3 years, maybe 4. And it was like a little bit nerve wracking because I was like, oh, I don't want to be the only one graduating from 2020. Yeah. But I found another friend who was also graduating at the same time that I was. And I was like, yay. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Prism International. You worked as the prose editor for them for 2 years. While you were in the program. How did you get that gig, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so they have the nice thing about UBC is they have a lot of like work learn experiences that are like kind of like you work as you learn kind of. Mm-hmm. But also there's like ones for like playwriting. It can be a director of Brave New Rights, or sorry, not director. I think you'd be like a co-producer of Brave New Rights. Another one is like Prism International, different editors like promotions, prose, poetry. That was another draw for me to apply to the program. But yeah, like I think they just opened up submission or applications, and then I just applied for it. I really enjoyed my experience, of course, but like I think at the same time it was a very intense experience because we would put out 4 issues a year, and we'd be like literally finishing editing the last issue as we're like accepting new submissions for the new issue. And so it was like a constant go. And I think I kind of burned myself out by the end for sure. But I think in the beginning I was like so stoked. I was so excited. And I think we did a lot of cool things. We put out a lot of calls because I find that literary journals sometimes don't take to speculative or like even slipstream kind of stories as much. And a lot of the time, I feel like a lot of BIPOC folks work in that stream because it's like the kind of like melding between realities, kind of like reality is so absurd. How do we like even approach it kind of thing? And so I wanted to have more people being able to submit or like being encouraged to submit in genre related writing. And so I was like, okay, let's do like calls for myth and calls for wonder and calls for spirit. And then we did a call for BIPOC folks specifically because I realized we didn't actually have an issue themed on BIPOC folks. And I was like, well, it's so weird. Why don't we have one yet? So yeah, I feel like we did a lot of related things like that. And we also started a podcast. And yeah, I think I really learned a lot from my experience just as editing and getting to know the community in Vancouver, the writing community in Vancouver as well, which I really enjoyed. And I think it was a really good experience for me. But we also went to AWP, which was like my first time. And I was like, oh my gosh, so many people. It's crazy. But I think, yeah, it was a good experience, but definitely very intense. And they cap it at 2 years for anybody. Like you can send for one more year, but you can't do any more than 2 years. And I think that's a good idea.
I've worked as a reader before at journals, and even that experience is pretty intense. So I imagine the prose editor position is even more intense.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier how you funded this program on your own through scholarships and working part-time. It seems, I was looking on the website, it seems like students in the program aren't guaranteed funding like they are in some other MFA programs. So I was curious if you know what kind of funding opportunities are available to students.
Yeah, so I think there's some funding that is very Canada specific or Canadian citizen or permanent resident specific, which I applied for, like the SHIRK, and that gives you $17,500 for a year. And I think there's other opportunities for funding in like other scholarships probably, but I think that was the main one for me. And then honestly, other than that, I think I just did part-time jobs, and Prism was like a work experience. So that helped a lot. And like TAing, I think usually applying for TA-ship works as well for funding. There's a lot of different genres in the undergrad as well. And so you can TA for courses like that. And I'm not sure what else, but I think partly for me choosing this program was also because it was like the tuition wasn't as high as some other state universities, which is like super, super high. I was like probably less than 10K a year at least. So I think the tuition was really, the fact that it was a lot lower than a lot of states universities was good. But I think it was actually kind of stressful funding it, honestly, because I didn't have a lot of savings going in either. And I didn't really know what finances was, and I just kind of went in blind. And yeah.
So what's it like living in Vancouver?
Well, I really loved it. I think I want to move there sometime. But I really love the mountains, and I love nature, and I think that kind of connection. Right now I'm living in Toronto, but with my family again. But like, I think that kind of connection to nature is just so wonderful. And like the fact that you can like walk to the beach anytime you want. And also I loved that it wasn't so like busy all the time, which I feel like Toronto has this vibe where like I went back, I stayed in Toronto for a bit, and I went back after like a week or two to Vancouver, and I realized I was walking faster than I used to, I was used to. Like, I think the fact that I was like walking and I was like kind of tilting forward as I was walking in Toronto, and then in Vancouver, I'm just like taking my time. like even the walking style is different. So I think it's just, I just think the Vancouver vibe is kind of for me, but the housing market is not for me. I think everybody likes Vancouver, but that's why the housing is so insane. And I just really think a lot of my the time of my life where I was living in Toronto versus living in Vancouver, I did not have a good time growing up in Toronto because of a lot of I guess I didn't know I was neurodivergent, and then I had a lot of social relationships that didn't work out, and it constantly didn't work out. And then anyways, I was going through a lot in Toronto, and then when I went to Vancouver, all of a sudden because I was ready to make those relationships happen, and then I just think I made more deeper connections a little bit in Vancouver. And so some of my close friends are there as well. So it's just like, I think I really loved my experience there. And I think the art scene is really vibrant in both cities, but like, I think I'm more connected to the one in Vancouver for obvious reasons.
I'm really glad to hear that you found your place and your people and that you had a good time in the program. And I'm really glad you took some time to come talk with me today. But before we go, I want to give you the last word. The last question I ask everyone when they come on is, what is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
I think for better, I think just developing more of a trust in my voice and my skills, and also like developing more of a trust in people in general. And that's maybe not necessarily what I was expecting when I was going into MFA, but I think I implicitly or subconsciously wanted that for myself, and I think I did manage to develop those a lot. And I think I think for the MFA experience, I think I was worried about workshops. I think I was worried about feeling like isolated or othered, and I think I didn't have that experience as I thought in the MFA program. And I really enjoyed just having the time and a place where people really like valued art, because like a lot of places I have people I know who will ask me, why are you doing MFA in creative writing? Like, what are you doing afterwards? Like, what job are you getting? Like, and they'll like look at my younger brother, and they'll be like, look at him, he's studying data science, he's so smart. Like, like kind of like that expectation. And so it was really nice to be in a place where art was valued and art was like really kind of like pushed to the forefront, and you could like explore art in your own terms and in your own ways of envisioning what like fiction or poetry looks like for you. And I think the freedom that came with it was really important. And I think that was a really good experience I had. Yeah.
Well, I value your art, and I know our listeners will too. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I had so much fun.
Thank you. I had so much fun too. Thank you, Jared.